Welcome to Pioneers, the show where we explore the intersection between humanity and AI. I'm your host, Ankur Patel. Over the last 10 years, I've built 3 AI startups, written 2 books about the subject, and I run a weekly AI newsletter. I also regularly teach and speak about the topic at conferences. This technology has grown faster than I think any of us could have imagined, and it's making us ask really important questions, such as how ethical is AI? What will this technology look like in a few years, let alone a few months? And most importantly, does it have the power to truly change the world? And what does it mean for you? On this show, I'll be interviewing the founders, operators, and pioneers that are introducing AI into their companies and industries. We'll be asking them the really heavy-hitting questions that make them dig deep into the core of what we do. And without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. Today, I have a very special guest, my good friend and fellow founder, Lior Cole. Lior, welcome to the show.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me. Good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here. So at Pioneers, we love the founder story, and I think you in particular have one of the best founder stories, the origin stories of any founder. So would love to have our audience hear from you directly how you got started as a founder in this space.
Yeah, so I was kind of like an accidental founder, but I do think that I was almost like destined for this. So, for context on why I feel that way, is I started my first business, you could say, in second grade. I would like go to yard sales when I was like super little, like at 5 a.m. I would like make my dad drive me, like buy everything, resell stuff on eBay and like refurbish things. So I feel like I was always on this track. But the way that I kind of came to actually starting my company is I was studying computer science at Cornell. And then I got really lucky. I was walking around while I was on break in Washington Square Park in New York City. And dress designer Batsheva Hay, she scouted me to model. She was like, will you do this Vogue runway photo shoot like right now? So I did that. IMG model signed me like right away worldwide. I opened this really big show, Parenza Schooler, the same like right after that. Kind of just did the whole circuit with like Milan, Paris Fashion Week. And then around the same time, I was building this other AI project just for fun. It was like a wrapper on top of GPT-3 before ChatGPT came out. It was kind of similar to ChatGPT. It was kind of like a Jewish ChatGPT. But people were still kind of like a little bit blown away by the fact that they could actually talk to AI because ChatGPT was not out yet. And so it kind of just picked up in press really quickly. Like BBC literally like DM'd me on Instagram, was like, can we do this like documentary, like have you in it? And Vogue reached out to do this whole profile. And so that all that press kind of just like associated me with my tech background. And then when I was working as a model with IMG, people like on set in the fashion industry were coming to me with all these questions about fashion and AI and the intersection. And that's when I really saw that there was this untapped potential that I was in this like very unique position to build within. And so I started just building this virtual avatar that was AI driven just for fun. And then like a VC, I met a VC 15, 17, and they really believed in me since day one. They put in the first check, and then IMG has been like so supportive, and we've just really grown from there. And I feel like I kind of started building my company before I knew that I was building a company, and then everything just happened from there.
Yeah. No, it's great. It feels very, very organic, right? I mean, basically studying comp sci, getting into the modeling world super fast, being having kind of a whirlwind moment where it happens super fast, sudden, and like all of a sudden you're flying around doing all these shows, and then you get looped into tapping into your own background, technical background. You see that there's opportunity in fashion, and then you're able to marry the two. So you have basically a connection to the fashion world, and you have the technical background, and now you're able to build. Um, so where are you in the journey of building this company now? Obviously, you had all the momentum. Where are you at this juncture?
Yeah, so we raised a little bit of money. We raised about like 500,000 so far, and that was all just based on inbounds. Like we didn't ever actually like opened a round or anything. But we will be opening a round probably like in January or something in the new year. And then other than that, I just onboarded a really talented CTO, which I'm like super excited about. Our first, like full-time employee. And then we should be live, like private beta live by the end of December. So excited for all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, super exciting, especially in the early days, but it's overwhelming too, I imagine, right? So,
Very
and
overwhelming.
this space in many, like of all the spaces, I think this space is hyper competitive because it's exciting. A lot of people want to do retail and want to do fashion. How do you think about the edge or the opportunity that you have to go in and be a kind of competitive player among all the other like would be competitors that you have?
Mhm. Yeah, this is kind of where the modeling experience comes into play, where I was incredibly lucky to be thrown into that world. And this is also a reason why I love the whole concept for this podcast, because really like the human element to AI is where I see the most value, and also like how you can build something that actually is used in the world and brings value to the world. So what I mean by that is like I have a very unique perspective and like network and position, inside of an industry that's totally separate from AI, which is fashion, and then coming to that with the expert, like the technical expertise, is really where I see just setting the stage to make the product sing.
Yeah, yeah. It's more focused on the human experience, right? When people encounter fashion, technology is an enabler. It's not leading with the technology. The technology is delivering value. And so when you look at the clients that you're selling into, how do you think about the value that AI and the models that you have? What value does it ultimately bring to them as the end user?
So, when you talk about models, are you talking about fashion models or AI models? Because I
Yeah, I mean, it's super confusing. I meant specifically the AI models. So basically, the technology is it's great. It's obviously developed quite a lot, especially now that it's mainstream. What opportunity do you think this technological inflection point has for the space that you're in?
Yeah. So one thing that I'm really excited about is a lot of the back end infrastructure that enables us to kind of like pick up on something intangible like style versus product features. So what I mean by that is like historically we've seen product kind of like querying a search bar for a specific fashion item just limited to product details. So like black button up, like floral dress, things like that. Versus what I'm the most excited about is the ability to say like, show me something to wear to my friend's wedding,
Yeah,
and have
yeah.
that actually give you a valuable response. So there are certain things in like the AI world that is enabling that to be more effective than ever before. So I think like sentiment based query is the infrastructure supporting that is what I'm most excited about.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. So from what you're saying, I think historically you had to explicitly use the product tags
Right.
to go and search for things. But now it seems like the interaction is much more human-like, where you could have a conversation with the AI, and the AI understands the semantic meaning of what you're looking to do, right? And I think the way you've described in the past is that you are it's summertime, you're going to the Hamptons, you have a certain look and feel based on prior choices. The AI should know what to suggest to you without you having to say, I need it to be this type of look with these types of product features.
Yeah, exactly. I think look kind of like the feel, getting a accurate response based on a feel that you have in mind is something that is like so exciting to me. I think it's also as you look back into like the evolution of technology, it's always kind of removing barriers between what's in your head and getting that out into the world. And what I mean by that is like looking at the example of like information retrieval is
Mhm.
always good for me at least to conceptualize things. So like you think about how it started with like informational retrieval started with like physical libraries, and then we had like search bars at Google, and now we have ChatGPT, which is
Yeah.
obviously like this sentiment based conversational interaction. And I see that in fashion where it's like at first we only had these like physical locations, and now we have like e-commerce stores, but it's still very manual, and the user experience can be a lot better. And now it's like, what is that ease of ChatGPT with the delivery of information going to be applied to something like fashion that's really hard to sort of grasp because it's so intangible, like what you're looking for. And one of the examples that I always kind of go back to when we're thinking about building our AI is like when the computer sees like a blazer that would be good for a job interview versus a blazer that's good for like a grungy concert or something, like the
Yeah.
computer doesn't really know, like how do we make it so that the computer knows the difference. And I think what we're seeing in AI right now is that that discrepancy is actually possible to differentiate between.
Yeah. No, that's spot on. I think that makes sense because on paper, they're both in the same product category. They may have the same dimensions, same color, but the style is so different. You wouldn't wear it. You would wear one to a job interview, one to a concert, right? And I think that's great. So for the end users, the consumers, there's clear apparent value, right? All of a sudden, you can search for things that you want to wear. It's almost like having a stylist that understands you and your taste.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go and precisely go and try to find the thing that you want. You're able to describe it. The AI knows you, it knows your taste, and knows the venue, and knows the occasion, and is able to kind of go and suggest something that makes sense. How do you think about the other side of the market, right? So brands selling into them, getting a foothold there. Obviously, your background should help with that side of things. But maybe if you could talk to how you get the other side of the marketplace here.
Yeah. So are you talking about like getting the brand's inventory into our system, or how we could kind
Yeah.
of help brands themselves? Yeah. So that's all. That's part of like just the network that I've kind of been thrown into. Like that's a very easy sell for me. For me to kind of go to these brands that I've either worked with or are mutual friends, and say like, we have this avatar coming out. She's going to shop for people like, we should sell your stuff. And so far I haven't had one no, because everyone is very excited to innovate in this space. But especially because fashion is so outside of the tech world, it's like there's almost like free terrain to actually build something. And then when something is built, that's cool, everyone kind of wants to like jump on it. So yeah, everyone's been super excited to incorporate their inventory into our backend. I kind of think of it as like, well, a couple different things. I kind of think of it, one is like almost like a Nordstrom like marketplace where there's a bunch of different brands in there, and we're kind of just the marketplace that's like selling all of it. And then aside from that, I see, so I, now that I've been in the industry for a little while and I wear some of my friends' brands that like they're smaller than like Prada, and so
Yeah.
not everyone knows about them yet. I've noticed that I always get like stopped wearing this stuff, like stopped like in person, and people are like, "What are you wearing?" Things like that. My friends are like, "What are like these like niche designers that I should be thinking about?" And so one thing that I'm excited about with Ari is incorporating both brands that are big and known and people love them already, but also incorporating like lots of niche indie brands, because this sort of interaction enables you to shop based on style rather than shopping just going on like one brand's website. So yeah, I think this sort of platform and like recommendation engine will really democratize the playing field for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what you just described is a great founder market fit, right? Because your background in fashion and then also in computer science and AI, there couldn't be a better match between like your experience and what you bring to the market. Because getting brands is so much easier for you because you're already in that space, and then you know the technology which you can build to serve the end user. What about, so one of the things that comes up in fashion a lot and retail generally is personalization, right? Really having a dialed in, personalized experience for every single end user. Now that is sounds great on paper, really hard to accomplish.
Yeah.
And then the other scary thing about this is that people are offering up their own data, right? And then it's like, how do you use that data? How do you protect that data? How do you make sure that data is not sold? So could you talk a little bit about how you go about personalization, particularly when it comes to using data for the benefit of the end user, but also being on the fair side of not having too much data that you don't need and just being secure with your use of that data long term?
Yeah, I think when you're building something new in the tech world, especially, it's very easy to kind of be overwhelmed by this totally brand new domain. And so, or this totally brand new terrain. But one thing that the way that I do it is like, what is like one step, one small step that can make what already exists a little bit better, you know?
Mhm.
So, our immediate small step was like, how do we build a model that labels data better or makes the data like richer, you know, with the labels that we're gonna kind of automate for this inventory coming into our platform, so that once a user queries our system, it has a little bit more information to work off of. And then it's like, okay, we solve that. And then like, how do you think about personalization? Like, because this interaction is with an avatar, we found that like we did a bunch of user testing. We found that like
Mhm.
people are giving literally their heart away to this avatar because they feel like they know her, you
Yeah.
know. And she's not like a person, so they don't feel like they have to ever like stop talking, you know. So like we get actually so much information about people because they're shopping for something that's very tied to how they feel and things
Mhm.
like that. So for example, someone will be like, I'm nervous about this like date and it's at this venue and like this is what happened last time and like all this stuff. So yeah, working with an overwhelming amount of data is the way that I think about it is kind of just figuring out the best way to classify it and filter it. And then it's not so much of a problem anymore. Like I'd rather work with too much data than
Mhm.
not enough data. Personalization in general, I mean, obviously is a big part of like my product, but it's something that I think the next wave of technology in general is going to be the most one of the most important parts. And I feel like we've seen that historically with like across like every industry. So like if you think of like music, like Spotify kind of enabled you to like curate what you listen to versus just like the radio, or like Netflix has curated like your entertainment versus just like regular TV, or like even Google, you know, like curating the information that you read rather than just like a base newspaper. So yeah, everything in this arena is in the personalization arena specifically is something that I'm very excited about. Clearly.
Yeah, yeah. I could tell, right? And I think that's right. That's a huge benefit to the end user because now they're just getting better content thrown their way, right? Because it's they give up some of their data, but in return they just get a much more beautiful user experience. So that's kind of the thing that people often forget about when you talk about data.
Yeah.
Can you discuss the potential for AI to create more ethical and sustainable fashion practices?
Yeah, so one way that I think about this is in automated like manufacturing. So as we're able to manufacture things that are more custom, like people can essentially create fashion items and not actually manufacture them until there's an actual person buying it on the end, on the
Mhm.
other end. You know, so that's one way. That's kind of like on the something that I think is more in reach within the next like couple of years to actually
Yep.
become something that is somewhat, you know, mainstream. On the total end of the spectrum, in the most extreme scenario, is kind of getting rid of needing to buy new clothes at all. So what I mean by that is, so I'm friends with the founder of Natalia, the founder of DressX. And so
Mhm.
what DressX does is basically they recognize that a lot of people buy things just to post on social media. So what they do is they just enable you to take a picture and then they just edit an out, like you can buy an outfit just edit on top of you. So I think we're a little bit way you know, a little bit farther from that becoming mainstream. I do think that people are still very much tied to like holding, you know, touching things physically and owning them. And it might even be just like a psychological thing of not wanting to feel like they're just buying something for social media, even though that's what's actually happening, you know.
Mhm.
But there's definitely a lot of players in the space of like how do we make fashion more sustainable on all ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think that highlights just AI being used for good, right? Because it's helping go and not produce things that aren't going to be ultimately used. And if it is for posting, for example, on social media, there are other ways to do it besides actually producing the good. I think this space that you're in hyper competitive, right? A lot of companies building here, especially now, like being in New York City as we are. So many VCs are throwing money at founders. Startups are being built. Very, very competitive space. As you think about building a very sustainable business, how do you think about building a moat where basically you have an advantage as you get more users and more brands on board? Where does that defensibility come from?
Yeah, I mean, part of the defensibility is after you get the users, then the model is already shaped for them. And so it's like, it's almost like you want to log into your Pinterest because it already knows what your algorithm should be like, versus anything
Mhm.
else. But then the question is like, how do you get the whole world onto your platform to begin with? I do
Yep.
think that this delivery of the back end software being this AI avatar is super helpful because people feel a relationship to her more than they would feel a relationship to like a search bar anywhere else. Another layer of this, which I don't even know if I think I forgot to mention in the beginning, is Ari is represented by IMG as a model. Like I just got wrapped a meeting at IMG's headquarters in New York right before this with like her social media manager and her modeling manager, and like she has a whole team around her. So yeah, I think people will feel a certain like closeness and relationship to Ari as an individual, even though she is a virtual avatar, and then that will kind of facilitate the beginning of this relationship, which in turn turns into like more use on our platform, and then that in turn creates like this algorithm that's is like kind of rich in their personal data, and then the recommendation system is tailored to them and everything.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think the moat comes from the data that users provide, right? Because like the models can change, like the models you're using, the models that we're using, that's likely to change 12 months or sooner.
Yeah.
But what doesn't change is the data that you have on all your users that makes the experience amazing. And I think your users in particular, because Ari is it has some emotional connection, right? The users have an emotional connection to her. That ends up being something that retains users for longer because they don't want to leave to use another competing product because they've built this emotional connection. And that I think is such a great hook because it's not transactional; it's an emotional thing. It keeps them there for longer. So you have repeat users coming back over and over time, offering up more data, which makes their experience better, right? Which creates that stickiness.
Yeah, and we've seen that also with like earlier products like Replica AI, which I don't know if you're familiar, but like AI friends, I know people actually who like literally talk to their Replica like every day. When the I don't know if you saw this, but when there was some kind of like internal software change or like permission change or something like that, and it kind of like a little bit tweaked the personalities of all the replicas, and people were like so infuriated because they felt like they're dating this avatar or they're like best friends with their like replica, and now the personality
Mm-hmm.
changed. So I think there have always kind of been indicators of like the her movie reality, and this is kind of
Yeah.
like playing on that with like a personal relationship with this AI avatar to shop for you.
Yep. Yeah. Wow. No, I did not hear that, but it makes sense. People, once you have an emotional bond, you don't want that other side to change, right? You want to keep them frozen in time, ideally. How do you think about making like a virtual avatar that's inclusive, right, of people from different cultures? Maybe they speak different languages. Maybe they have different cultural considerations. So, is it a single avatar for everybody, or do you think about having different avatars tailored to different people?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because I feel like in the ideal world, advertisements will be dynamic in the sense that, like, if you're looking at a article of clothing, the model will look like you. The reality
Mhm.
is, as we all know, this world is powered by bottom line, and so my fear is that when these ads become like when the tech gets there to the point where like everyone will be retrieving different ads based on their personal preferences, what will actually happen is that you're not going to see yourself, but you're going to see the type of person that would be like the highest chance of like an ROI or like a click,
Mhm.
um, and so what that like the danger there is that it could just remove all diversity in like all like representation in like public facing media, because we don't know if like the highest chance of a click is just like the Barbie doll, like blonde hair,
Yeah.
blue eyes girl, like we don't know that. So that's one of my fears with the avatar conversation. What I hope it happens is that you'll be able to see yourself everywhere, but I just don't. Time will tell.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, ultimately it will be ROI, and it could be that the ROI and the personalized, like the version of yourself in all the ads, maybe that is aligned. That could be possible, right? Like maybe if you get an email newsletter and the people that are depicted look like you, right? To some extent, maybe you're more likely to click on it. So maybe it is aligned, but to the
Yeah.
extent that there is a divergence, I do think that. Um, Given that we live in a very capitalist society, it is going to be ultimately ROI that governs which ads are shown to which people. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and I almost like, I hope for that, positive, or optimistic view of the future where like kind of stars will align and like the
Mm.
highest chance of a click is actually someone that looks like you. But if you look at ads today, almost no model looks like what the average person. Like, I'm 6 feet tall. I don't know how relatable my Zara campaign was, but I still was the chosen model for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess, but that's also like people making, on the fashion side, or I guess like the marketing side, making kind of like guesses as to what their audience would like, and maybe those guesses were wrong. Like maybe people really do want to see more diverse everything. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing that's going to play out, and certainly you've seen progress towards that to some extent, right? I think like through social and ad campaigns in general. But as you're building Ari, how do you think about that? Because the conversational portion is one way to manifest different. Um, like, I guess it caters to people with different backgrounds, different languages, different cultures, right? How do you think about introducing that personalization on the avatar side?
Yeah, language 100%. That's like a no-brainer. One thing that's come up a lot is like the question of, are we going to make Ari look like whoever is using her, or is Ari going to just stay the same? Because right now she is very much like a traditional model that's like same kind of body type as like I am. Um and so I've been very firm on like keeping her as this consistent face. And I think of it as the difference kind of between like putting a supermodel in a campaign versus taking a photo of an article of clothing on like a mannequin. And there's value to both. But what I see with Ari is that the value is in this personal relationship where you feel like you know this other being. And
Mhm.
that doesn't come from that being always being you, like a reflection of you. I do think so. Part of that though is basically another thing that comes up a lot is like, is Ari going to be modeling the clothes that she's actually like recommending outside of her doing like regular fashion campaigns? And the answer is like definitely not, because like she is not relatable, and because we're sticking to this like not being consistent with what she looks like and everything, that's not relatable for a majority of the population. So one thing that I'm thinking about in the future is that like when people are shopping using Ari, like there could be a sort of like mannequin-esque display that represents, your body type. But yeah, it's never going to be on her, and we're never going to change the way that she looks for all those
Right.
reasons.
Yeah, because I think what you're describing Ari is she is a digital manifestation of a person, right? And so that's potentially physical, that's certainly emotional, the way that she behaves, and so you wouldn't alter that, right? For the audience, she's consistent throughout. It feels very much like her. You have I mean, even though we were referring to Ari as she, right, and she's like
Yeah.
represented, and the people have an emotional connection. At some point, they don't want her to change.
Yeah.
So, how do you think about thinking of AI as individual, maybe with maybe agencies is not the right word, but a complete profile, like a physical, mental, emotional profile, and you're the mastermind, you're the curator, you have so much power in your hands,
Yeah.
especially as many people develop a relationship with her.
Yeah, so this is actually the reason why I was interested in getting into AI in the first place. When it
Mhm.
all started out, was kind of like this really intriguing ability to kind of decode the way that people think and then build that up into this sort of like fabricated being, and then having the ability to like manipulate every single one of those variables is something that is like really exciting for me. And another layer of that is like we can only really, I guess, like the boundaries of our own perspective is very much confined by our human experience. And for something like Ari, who we use like we use, we call her she, not like it, and we use these very like humanized language around her. At the end of the day, she still isn't a person. She's obviously software. She just behaves like a person. So what's exciting to me is really like seeing the world through this lens that's beyond what our lens is, and that's what I want Ari to do for people.
Mhm.
That was like kind of the mentality behind Robo Rabbi, that original AI project that I made, a million years ago. Million years ago, probably like 2 years ago now. But that was like everything that I do. I feel like it always, not even on purpose, but like comes down to that of like wanting to experience and see and feel like more of the world. And there's no better way to do that than through the lens of something that's totally outside of your human experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right, and it's interesting to see like the inspiration that led you to create Ari, who was very much kind of viewing AI as this more human, human-like version, right? I think what's interesting though is you're seeing AI generate content on social across the board in text form, right? And so more and more brands are represented by kind of an AI based voice, maybe AI generated content. And it'll be really interesting to see if people trust AI in the same way that people trust people, right? Because for the longest time, it was this person to person connection that led to people developing trust. So, do you see a world where people are less trusting of brands because they're using AI generated bots as models or AI generated content, perhaps? And how do you think about that?
Yeah, if you would ask me that like a year ago, I'd be like 100%. I would think, I mean, when I see like AI bots, like, I don't know if you've seen like Kendall Jenner's like Billy, I'm just like, I know that that's not Kendall. Like, none of this is authentic. So I would say yes, but now that I've seen sort of like these avatars and bots like develop and get more integrated into the world, we have like more data, I guess, to formulate opinions off of. Like I've seen like virtual avatars do mascara campaigns, and it like really is successful clearly because they keep doing them. There's in Asian markets there's this social media called Weibo, and they have these like Weibo cosmetic influencers, and it's some of them are like pretty high quality like 3D avatars that are like beauty influencers, but some of them are like SpongeBob level like cartoons. Like there's no like trickery here. Like it's clearly like a cartoon version of a person. And they're still like pushing sales and numbers. And like this is a beauty influencer, meaning like makeup. Like I would think that people would want to see it on their own face. So for me, I don't know if I'm influenced by virtual avatars wearing, especially within like the makeup realm, like clothing, maybe because it's like less about what it's going to look like on me and more about like the vibe and everything, as long as it's like
Mhm.
human like. But yeah, I guess I'm just behind the rest of the world that is seeing mascara on like a SpongeBob level character and going to
Yeah.
buy it.
Yeah, that's so interesting because you're absolutely right. A year ago, it would have been hard to believe that people, still like view AI in this way that they are now, where they've come to accept it.
Yeah,
And I think the evidence just shows that AI is being included, right? Like people aren't eschewing the use of AI. I mean, it'll be interesting to see like over time how that plays out because it could be that at some point people lose trust in AI to some extent if there's a crisis. But right now, it seems like they're okay letting it kind of come into their life a little bit. Um,
yeah,
what about, and this is a little bit more controversial, but for the longest time, obviously OpenAI and even Meta in releasing Llama and Llama 2, they've gone out of their way to make sure the models aren't biased, that they are, they're they're somewhat filtered. Like they won't say something that is going to be antagonistic or offensive, and it's not as opinionated, perhaps. So it's like a more muted, more clerical, clinical version of AI. And then you have others like Elon, for example, releasing Grok, and it's a little bit less filtered, right? A little bit less toned down, where it has a stronger personality for better or worse. And when you look at humans, humans are typically like they run the full gamut for better or worse, right? They could be in extremes. What's your view in AI maybe taking on more not offensive personalities, but personalities that are more diverse and more extreme along the different topics and things like that? Is that a welcome thing, or are you in favor of having something that is a little bit more in the camp of an open AI or a Meta?
Yeah, I think kind of in a theoretical world, I'm pro like don't legislate any of this stuff. Like this is free speech, like we should have almost like the free speech version of AI, which is like expose it to all the information and let it do whatever it wants. But I think the reality answer is that free speech is I just use that as like a kind of way to think about this, is different for like a person, because how like every person is entitled to their opinion and to say whatever they want and everything, and they're just like one of one, like they're just an
Yep.
individual person. But then for AI specifically, like there's this platform and now it's like that reaches essentially could reach like the whole world, especially if it's a bot that you can talk to. Like the entire world can now talk to this like very problematic bot, and that can totally shift societal functioning in general. So I am very much of the mindset that like AI needs to be regulated in this sense and in every other sense, as much as like a doctor would be like medical practices are
Hmm.
regulated, because of the power that AI has at scale. One of the like early examples is, I forgot who released it. I think it was Bing. They released like some version of like you can kind of just like type to the bot and it just like learns on the information that it
Yeah.
receives. I don't remember what the name was, but basically after like a couple minutes or something like that, it like turned into a Nazi, which is like horrible. Like you
Yeah.
can't have an AI turn into a Nazi and have that touch like millions of or
Yeah.
even more, people. I think that's also a comment on like just the product of that is indicative of how people hidden behind their screen and just with a keyboard, they behave very differently than what they would say to like another human being, and
Yeah.
do we really want that to be the training model for what how society, the AIs that help society run? Like personally, I would not.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's very interesting, like the digging into this, because it's really hard to govern technology and regulate technology, but how that technology is used, right? I think that is an area that you could govern. So you could
Yeah.
have technology that you use to introduce more colorful personalities, and as long as it's not doing societal harm, that's fair play, right? Like that is just technology that's being a little bit more expressive, but if you use that to an extreme measure and now you're spreading false information, or you're kind of leading to disruption for the way society functions, because of how these models can scale, right? Technology can scale in that manner. Then all of a sudden you should govern the consequences of technology being used in a malicious manner. And yeah, it'll be really interesting to see whether regulators truly get that right. Because on
Yeah.
one hand, if you don't regulate, then it's wild, wild west. But if you do regulate too aggressively, you may get into a situation where you lose the arms race that's happening globally in terms of developing better models and developing better AI based software. So to have a real great competitive edge, you still need to be able to be creative with the use of this technology, but just prevent malicious use of it, right? And it's a really fine line to draw.
Yeah, and just on the note of like the legislators kind of getting this right or not, like the reality is that legislators do whatever is going to help, their sponsors or just get general votes and things like that. So I think it comes down to not so much like what the legislators will do on their own, because it doesn't seem like legislators don't do anything on their own. They are powered by like all these external forces, you know? And so one of those forces is obviously a big one, which is like the money behind it. And that
Mhm.
is definitely going against regulation because the people with the deepest pockets are the big tech companies that don't want their products to be regulated. But on the other side, like people definitely have leverage and power when there's like a overwhelming public consensus about something. I think the problem there is that technology feels right now so intimidating and so like complicated and everything, so that people kind of refrain from really understanding how it works and like what the societal implications and things like that are. I've had conversations with people about like how problematic it is when big tech is collecting all our data and things. Are like, but I just want my personalized ads. And I'm like, but that's not like exactly what I'm talking about. So I think the only real solution is educating the general public somehow, so that we can actually like lobby for legislation that's aligned with the best interests for general society.
Yeah. No, I think that's right, and it has to come from the industries as well, right? Otherwise, you're giving, um, basically, you're not helping shape this with regulators. So it needs to come from the commercial interests as well to some extent.
Yeah.
Um, so looking ahead, can you paint us a picture of what, I guess, fashion? Maybe let's start there. What that looks like in 3 years from now, given all the things you're seeing on the ground.
Yeah, I'm thinking. So, one thing that I'm obviously the most excited about is the recommendation systems and enabling the delivery of products to be more curated based on like people. And then the other side is also just like on the modeling side, how are these virtual avatars and also like AI generated content? How is that going to influence, fashion media, which is modeling, like, photo media? That's an interesting one where there are definitely a lot of people who are afraid of like, I'm a photographer now, like what's going to happen to my job, or like I'm a model, what's going to happen to my job, and things like that. I always kind of uh, go back to earlier examples of like when people were originally like painters, right? And then like the camera was invented, and these creatives were definitely like freaking out that their job, as a painter is going to be replaced. But the reality is that like photography just enabled a whole nother like area for creativity, and painting actually was kind of like freed up because of that, because now there's no longer an expectation to just make realism, like explicit realism,
Yeah.
like that. Now you can like
Mhm.
be abstract and things like that, and camera does something else. So I'm very optimistic in the long run about what AI will do for fashion, in the sense that it will replace what humans shouldn't be doing and then free up time to actually be like the creative in charge. Um, and so I'm like overall optimistic about where it's going. And also, all of these principles are very much applied to like the fashion design process, and all of these insecurities are also very much applied to that. But I think in the short term, there's going to be a lot of insecurity, and definitely like a lot of like pain and like short term job replacements. But in the long run, it's just going to open up more space for human creativity, I think.
That's incredible, and I'm glad you're taking on that view, because sometimes you only hear the doom and gloom,
Yeah.
in the very pessimistic, apocalyptic version. But I think you're right. I think the transition period is hard when there's a new technological inflection point. It does mean things kind of get murky, right? The transition's hard, but looking, further into the future, um, people do adapt, and it introduces new ways of being creative that were never possible before, right? Because it liberates you from the things that you were doing that now AI can take on. But
Right.
it is scary in the short term. But I think in the long term, if you adapt, and I think most people will, it is a huge opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what is it like being in New York City? Obviously SF, New York, some of the biggest hubs of AI startups and venture capital. What are some of the pros and cons of building in New York City at this time?
Pro is definitely the energy and the network. So energy is for all the founders out there, they know that like highs are very high, but lows are like very low. And so being in this ecosystem of like excitement around the space is very much a motivator when you're at like one of those low points where you can feel like I every day feel like I'm kind of like building this exciting future. So it enables you to push back all of those roadblocks.
Uh-huh.
And so that's kind of like the energy. The network is also like so important in this with it, which is just like being able to bounce ideas around like so many other perspectives in the space and other founders and other engineers and things like that is just like so important. Also, like collaborations are so important in just benefiting from kind of like building each other up, whether you're like a founder in a similar space or a founder in a different space, but you can work together. I was just talking to a founder last night in like the payment space and like thinking about ways that we can work together because we're transacting on our platform. It's totally different, but you know, that sort of interaction wouldn't have happened if I wasn't just like at a networking event last night, you know? Um, so yeah, I think overall it's just like the excitement and the network is really valuable to be building here in the
Yeah.
city, and I'm sure in SF, even though I've never been.
It's surprising you haven't been there yet, but makes sense. Like New York City is definitely the fashion capital, right? So if you're going to be building anywhere, it's here. What are some of the downsides of building in New York, though? I'm sure there are some. I'm curious what are top of mind for you.
Yeah, so downsides of all of that is pretty much the kind of the same thing where like there are so many ideas and so much excitement that it's easy to start getting distracted and start wanting to build like the entire future when in reality to do something well you kind of have to like build one lane within the entire future, you know.
Yeah.
It's also, this is just like a separate note that I've heard a lot of founders kind of struggle with in the city, where the excitement is so much that they end up like it ends up actually like being hard to hire people because everyone is just who's talented is just starting their own company.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. No, I think that's absolutely right. All those points, I definitely can confirm it's very much that case. So,
Yeah.
what advice do you have for young founders? I mean, obviously, you being where you are, very successful, very young, very successful. What advice do you have to other founders that are maybe getting started or looking to get started in perhaps building their own company or joining a startup? What can they learn from the experience that you've had to date?
Yeah, I think the biggest unlock for me was the realization that you are whatever you say you are. And that might actually sound very like Theranos of me, but the real and definitely don't go to that extreme. But and yeah, I don't mean it in the product sense, but what I mean by that is like in the person sense of like I'm 22. Like when I started, it was like a year. Let's say like 21. I'm like talking to people, you know, at these events that have started multiple companies. They're like much older than me. They're managing, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars versus my like half a million that we raised. You know, so it's easy to kind of feel like you're so much like so much like below these other very successful people because there's always going to be someone that's like much more successful than you,
Mhm.
and that's always the spaces that you want to be in anyway. um, what was an unlock for me was just like not really defining who I am by the comparison of who is around me, and just being kind of realizing that like we are all in the same space right now, and like some people are managing hundreds of millions of dollars and some people are managing $500,000, you know.
Mhm.
But in the reality is that like we are all doing the same thing of like building something that doesn't exist yet and trying to like shape the future. And that has been super helpful in being able to move forward and build effectively, because you it just unlocks a huge amount of like conviction in yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I completely agree. And it's the moment in time where, because there's this big technological inflection point, like machine learning becoming mainstream, you only experience that every now now and then, right? So the internet really coming into fruition late 90s, mobile coming to fruition in the late 2000s, and now machine learning becoming mainstream. It's a hard reset for everybody. I don't care how many years of experience you have, it's a reset. And even the people that should know everything, but don't necessarily, because of the shifting environment, like venture capitalists, right? They don't really know which ideas are going to really play out. They're betting on the technology and the different ways the technology can be applied, but they don't really know. No one really knows, and that's, like, in a way, very comforting, because as a founder, you can just go and kind of put your idea out there and build on top of that, because no one knows whether that idea is going to pan out or not, right? And it's a hard reset for everybody, which is, I think, it's disconcerting to some extent, because it's scary, but at the same time, like, it levels the playing field quite a bit for early founders.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's just the recognition that there are no right answers. There's only the right way to approach things, and that's just doing everything, with confidence and with a lot of, as much research as you possibly can gather behind you, and doing things quickly instead of just looking for the right answers that don't exist.
Yeah. Well, Lior, it's been incredible having you on the show. For our viewers, where can they learn more about you and the company you're building?
Yeah, so for me, I'm just on social media. My name, Lior Cole, on everything. And then for Ari, we have a ShopARI. ShopARI is our official name. We have a ShopARI Instagram. ShopARI.com is where you can actually sign up to get beta access. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll put that in the show notes. And I really look forward to having a conversation with you about a year from now, once you've launched and are in the market. It'll be very, very exciting to see. But
Yeah,
thanks for being on this show. Really
of
appreciate it.
course. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.